I think as musicians, especially as performers, we're always aspiring for those moments. It's like, man, I hope the next moment is one of those where I don't doubt myself and I'm not afraid and I can just play.
You're listening to Artistry with Heart, a musician's wellness podcast. I'm Stephanie Lynn Bernards. Today we're having a conversation with Justin Copeland, an incredible jazz trumpeter, educator, and composer whose improvisations and compositions exude incredible intentionality, virtuosity, and depth. He has studied and performed all the way through the doctoral level and has been an active performer both locally and internationally with many different incredible musical groups. Justin, I'm so honored to have you with me today.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephanie. This is a treat, truly.
So, Justin, when I was studying up on you, I learned that you began your musical journey playing piano.
Yep, that's right. And I've been playing piano still ever since, but 12 is when I started trumpet and I stopped formally studying piano, taking lessons, with a teacher. It was my first foray into just learning music and to learning how to practice and, learning theory. And I'm so grateful to have started on piano because I started to learn just the basics of like chords just on my own. Like I remember being 7 or 8 and practicing at home and finding like, oh, if I play C, E, and G together, that's kind of cool. All right, what if I change the E to an E? Wow, okay. And then that like transferring over, that's timeless foundational information, obviously, learning chords. So by the time I got into, junior high, high school, I had a little bit more of a foundation than maybe some other kids may have had who didn't start with piano.
Yeah, that's the gift. It's so visual.
Yeah, exactly.
And I don't know much about the trumpet, but I could guess that it's not. Kind of like the opposite.
Yes. Oh my gosh. The trumpet is, it's only as visual as you can see it. Like you can see it from the outside and that's it. But otherwise, it's a very abstract instrument. Wind instruments in general kind of are, outside of woodwinds, which are a little bit more literal and concrete. All the notes, for the most part, are kind of built into the instrument. But brass is, it's just conceptual. It's like a theoretical instrument, so to speak, in many ways. And starting kids young on the trumpet it's an endeavor because the trumpet, brass in general, but trumpet especially, is a very unforgiving instrument. And it's not one that you can just pick up and start playing music right away. You have to learn how to play the instrument first. And either children or their parents, in my experience teaching, they either get over that hurdle or they don't. I've had many parents, after maybe 3 weeks of lessons, like, can we start learning some music now? And I'm like, Kimmy needs to learn how to make a sound. I'm sorry, like this is going to take some time. It's not guitar, it's not piano where you just pluck or press and it's there. So I'm glad I didn't start with the trumpet first. I don't know where I would end up.
Yeah, definitely. That makes a lot of sense. Well, that's super cool. It's great to be multifaceted and have the knowledge of more than one instrument. And, as you said, it sounds like piano created the foundation for your trumpet.
Definitely.
So you said that at that point, somehow, perhaps unconsciously, you decided that you would never stop playing music and ultimately perform at the professional level. Mm-hmm. So can you say more about that moment or moments that led you to this realization?
Yeah, I couldn't measure it with a moment, so to speak. I just couldn't see myself not doing it. I had already started to develop my identity around not only being a musician, but the idea of working at something that was hard and meeting challenge and growing and having always aspiring for something greater even if it's just a few steps ahead, so that was my driving force early on, I think. And I didn't realize it till later.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I think sometimes you just need that carrot. Like hard work does pay off, especially with something like the trumpet. You're showing up with this instrument that it takes some time to really even be able to create like a nice sound, let alone music. And so it's amazing that you were able to see that it is the hard work and the effort that you put up front that allows you to continue to evolve and grow. I think it's just a great example for people, to really hear that, it is like, that nugget, that hard work and effort and perseverance over time really gives you. That's what keeps you going.
Definitely. And I would be remiss if I didn't mention one of the most important aspects, which is other people. Whatever success looks like for us, I don't believe it happens in a vacuum. I don't believe we can truly achieve quote unquote success alone, no matter what arena you're in. So I, again, would be remiss if I did not mention the peers and the teachers and mentors I had along the way who, poured into me, who showed me the value of practice, who, praised my overcomings, who, were very clear when I had stuff to work on and were honest with me and just always gave me something new to strive for. So that was huge as well.
So, talking about these teachers, these peers, I'm curious if you could just tell me a little about your earlier years and, who was influential in your life when you were young and how do you see these early years informing your musicianship now?
Wow, that's a great question. When I was young, I was really excited about music. I was borderline fanatical and not only my practicing, but also just like how I would interface with musicality in my world. I would always be humming and singing. And once I learned to whistle, I'd be whistling. Anything I heard on TV, anything I heard on the radio, music just kind of flowed through me all the time. And it was annoying at times. I will say that for my parents. Yes. They're like, honestly, that was one of the impetuses that had them put me into music lessons, was like, this guy needs an outlet. We're at the dinner table and he's just humming nonstop. So that excitement started early on. So I was always excited to practice. I was doing a lot of listening as a kid, and I was really fortunate to have a bit of a musical background with my parents, both who had studied music to different degrees, and my dad especially would always give me CDs to listen to. He would burn CDs, which is not a thing anymore these days. So I would literally every night, I would either be up late listening or I would go to sleep listening to all sorts of different musicians, especially jazz, early on. And that, just pouring that kind of musical information in my ears constantly always kept me coming back to the instrument and trying to play what I heard. However, the other side of the coin, especially with the trumpet, is I struggled a lot to physically play the instrument. I started without any lessons. I didn't take lessons on trumpet and, for probably the first 3 or 4 years. So I learned how to play on my own. I kind of taught myself, but I developed a ton of terrible habits as a result. And from there, it was an uphill battle all through high school, into college, through college, uphill battle. I felt like, at least for me, from my point of view, I struggled more than my peers. And I always felt like I was inferior. I felt like I wasn't really built to play the trumpet, even like anatomically speaking, but I just kind of made it work. I have larger lips. A lot of my peers had very small lips, and we're all trying to fit them into the same size mouthpiece. And so I felt like that was always an insecurity of mine. So I spent a lot of my young years stifling that insecurity and trying to just practice through it, play through it. And as a result, I excelled, but I was excelling on top of some very unstable ground of just like my own, again, just personal security and confidence in myself. So I struggled with that for a long time, but a lot of people didn't know because I wouldn't really talk about it. I would just have to find a way to play as well as everyone else, feeling like I had this handicap. Now, to this day, I don't know if that's really what it was. Like, oh, yeah, you just had it harder. I don't know, maybe. But either way, it it was it didn't feel natural, but at the same time, at least trumpet-wise, it didn't feel natural, but music felt natural. It's always felt natural to me.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say it didn't feel natural, and yet you were able to push so hard to get to this level.
Yeah, I mean, that was always the goal, was to cover up the difficulties, the insecurities, and to just play to the level of wherever I was.
You mentioned that you were able to push through, and I think that that's the thing so often with musicians is we are able to push through and put on this presentation for people to see, which is wonderful, and I think it's a very wonderful skill that we all have that we get up and we perform. That's the nature of the game, right? To be a performer. But when you have this undercurrent underneath that's a little shaky, it can take some time to unravel. And I'm just, I'm curious, at what point did you start noticing that this foundation needed a little bit of grounding and broadening and deepening and of, security versus insecurity? I mean, I guess, what was that route like?
Yeah, well, I would say there was the physical route and there was the psycho-emotional route, however you want to speak it, internal and external, that I had to embark on together. And the physical manifested in the form of, and I don't want to get too technical here, but in terms of the trumpet, we have simply the way that the mouthpiece rests on the lips. We call that the embouchure. And there's certain philosophies on a correct embouchure versus an incorrect, but needless to say, I started with a very incorrect embouchure. And the way the muscles work in the face, they, at least muscles in general, just throughout the body, they can be trained, they can be fine-tuned to work a certain way. And then if you want to change something, even a small change it can take months, if not years, to really get the body adjusted. So that's kind of what I was dealing with. I finally decided when I got to high school that I needed to make what we call an embouchure change. And every change is a setback. So I got to high school and I had to take a setback, but it needed to happen because literally in high school, I started doing marching band. And as you know, in marching band, we're actually moving, we're stepping out on the field while playing. And I remember at our first marching band rehearsal, I took a step while playing and literally the sound stopped. I'm like, okay, I'm not going to be able to play the way I've been playing the last 2 years. And so I took that whole first year of my freshman year of high school was a struggle, but I built up on that new setting. I did another shift the following year, sophomore year, and every time you change and you work to rebuild, you get a little bit stronger each time. So I did that 3 times in high school. Most trumpet players might do this one time in their entire career. By the time I had been playing the trumpet for, 5-6 years, I had already changed 3 times. So I got to college. I finished my first year of college. At the end of that first year, I had a great trumpet professor at college. And I told him, I want to change again. And I think this will hopefully be the last one. And he guided me through that because it needed to happen. That was once again another setback, but I just hit it. Again, I just kind of covered it up and still somehow excelled. But I kept that setting all the way through the rest of college and got, again, really stronger than I had ever been. By the time I got to grad school, I was doing okay, but there was still some inconsistencies I was dealing with. So after my first year of grad school, I decided to change one more time, and that was the last one. And physically from there, I feel like I've been building. So in a way, it's not exact, but I feel like I've almost been playing the trumpet for the past 10 years. Even though I've been playing for like 25, that final switch was kind of it's almost like starting over in a way. And as we've already kind of talked about, the underpinnings of that whole journey, the psychological, emotional journey, was something I was not really aware of the whole time. I just knew what didn't feel good. I knew what felt good. And it wasn't until I got to college when I had that first trumpet professor start to kind of help me examine the internal environment. And he after my first year of studying with him, he got a really good understanding of how I work. And he's like, you know what? I feel like you have two selves. You have two people, two, not personalities, but just like sides of yourself. And you have the one that is the hard worker that has belief in what you can do, that will pummel through any challenge and that will rise up to any expectation. And then you have the other self, which is completely doubtful of everything, is constantly looking at your imperfections, is whispering in your ear, giving, planting that doubt. Are you sure you can do that right? Or are you sure you're doing this correctly? Are you sure this can't be better? That kind of thing. And he told me, he's like, I don't know if you can ultimately get rid of the second one, like forever. But I think having an awareness that it's there, having acknowledgement that, yes, you do have that natural self-doubt. You can find ways to manage it. You can find ways to see it for what it is and just see it's doubt, but it's not necessarily reality. And it took me some years to really lean into that understanding and to move forward, knowing that, the physical aspect of my trumpet playing did not define me. The identity, the musician's identity with our craft, it can so much reflect how we feel about ourselves depending on how well we do it. I'm sure you can probably relate to that. And, how bad or good, quote unquote, I played on any given day or during any given season reflected how I felt about myself as a person, which is not healthy at all. And it's something that needs to be addressed by any aspiring artist. You are not your art.
It's so challenging to put what you're talking about into words.
Yeah.
But I can't tell you how many times I've heard different permutations of that exact same thing.
Yeah.
Right? Like where you have this self-assured person, you're exuding this true self when you show up in the world. And that is not false, but it's the way in which you show up in the world that can be dictated by that second persona,
Yes.
And I think it's interesting because it's so easy to show people what you know and feel like that's it. And it's really like, how do you really show you what you know? And that's the work that then kind of keeps you going for the rest of your life,
That's so true.
I find it really interesting because I think there's so many times where I've had that internal dialogue with myself, and I've learned it with so many other musicians as well. And I think just naming it, right, and under just working with it and understanding that maybe it might not be true that you need to hide this doubt, because when you put doubt in the light, all of a sudden it's not so scary, right? It's the same with shame. It's the same with feeling like you're not good enough.
Yeah.
As soon as you kind of name it, then all of a sudden you realize it's kind of silly, because we all it's the same way. And I find it so interesting because it's not about the level of musician, right? It's really truly not. I mean, yes, I have some beginner pianists that I work with that say the same thing that I hear you saying, that I constantly say myself, that I have heard, other incredibly technically virtuosic musicians that are famous. And I think it's just more about naming it and claiming what is truly yours, which is a lifelong journey. You mentioned college, and I want to segue into the fact that you have a DMA, right, in Judas Studies. Is that
That's right? Yeah.
So, I mean, that's a lot of self-work to do throughout the course of graduate school, and then reaching like the highest level that you possibly can, educationally speaking, with music, and still having this doubt, right? I mean, isn't that, I mean, I'm not saying it's funny, because it's not funny. It's dreadful. I hate self-doubt. Yeah. But it's just, I mean, people just think that you're going to get to this certain level and then that doubt just goes away, and it's really more than that, right? It's like, it starts with that thing that you had when you were 7, that you evolved.
Yes.
That you love music, that you choose, that you want to continue to do it because it's in you, right?
Yeah.
And that's so much more than proving to the world that you have something to say. It's like you always know.
Definitely.
So, and I think so many people know. They start out when they start out in their life and in their musical journey, and they know that they just have something to say creatively. And then as time passes, you realize, oh, well, I sound different than other people, or I look different than other people, or I approach music in a different way, or I don't know how to read bass clef or whatever, and like, so I'm a freak. And it's like, or I just shouldn't be doing music because it's not easy.
Yeah. The idea that everyone carries doubt with them, no matter what level you're at, is so true. Obviously there will be certain moments that you have, experiences that you have where you're way more confident than others, where the doubt is absent for whatever reason, or it's just quiet and you're able to show who you really are. And I think as musicians, especially as performers, we're always aspiring for those moments. It's like, man, I hope the next moment is one of those where I don't doubt myself and I'm not afraid and I can just play. And I don't know about you, but for me, it's been really kind of a lifelong work to try to, this is kind of maddening, but to try to control when those moments will take place, and to more importantly, try to understand in the moments when the doubt is there, when the nerves are there, like why, what's happening here? What is going on internally? Why does this moment feel different from a moment that I had a month ago when I played great? I'm the same me. I've actually been working just as hard from then to now. Why am I nervous? Now I haven't quite cracked the code. The only thing I could say is we care. Like, obviously we care, and otherwise you wouldn't feel these things. You wouldn't feel nervous. You wouldn't start to doubt your abilities. But nonetheless, like, I guess the journey is just learning to play through that, knowing that it will never truly go away. It's kind of unpredictable. You don't know when it's going to come back. And in those moments, whether you're feeling at your top or, the ground is shaky, it's like we have a foundation to fall back on and know that you're still going to be you and you're still going to play yourself. Even if you're not thrilled with how it comes out, most people won't know. And that's the hard thing to accept, is that no one really knows what we're going through. Of course, we want our efforts to feel good. And when they don't, it feels like, well, I must be doing it wrong, because it should feel easy or effortless or flow or whatever. But we can still get from point A to point B with all the work we've done as a foundation, even if on some days it's a little bit more arduous.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I so agree. And I think I kind of want to think about that whole concept of how does it sound versus how does it feel? Because there's this whole saying that feelings are not facts, and just because you have a feeling, it does not make it so. Just because you have a thought does not make it so. Thinking does not make it so. Feeling does not make it so. And that's not to say that, to disregard intuition or gut instincts or anything like that, but that's not really what I'm talking about. It's that feeling of self-doubt. It's that feeling of being like, oh God, I suck. And you realize that it's like, just because you feel like you didn't do well, or just because, you feel like you didn't rise to the occasion, doesn't necessarily mean it's true. I'm curious too, you mentioned a little bit of like nervousness. Have you ever struggled with performance anxiety, or has it just kind of been an intermittent nervousness? And if you have, how do you cope with it? And if not?
Yes. No. For me, all I could say is I've had extreme nervousness. Maybe that's how I might put it myself. It's never felt truly debilitating. But it's definitely a terrible feeling. And for me, and not just for me, of course, it manifests very physically. My mouth dries up and I get cotton mouth, which is not a great thing for playing a wind instrument that requires moisture and suppleness. So that affects the way I play, which then feeds back into the loop of like what I'm thinking and how I'm feeling, because the physical is now part of the loop, because it's directly affected by the feeling, and it just continues on, and it's a vicious cycle. And so I've had moments where, maybe things are going okay in a performance and I don't do something quite right, and it's very noticeable. And that creates a spiral of like, oh no, oh no, oh no. And I might just cling to that moment, and then that just affects the rest of the performance, and it can snowball. I've had many performances where before I even start, I'm feeling it. I'm like, okay, what do I do? Like, do I breathe? Maybe I should breathe deeper. I don't know. And I'm always, again, I've been trying to manage and control this and understand it better. Like, what can I do in the moment to to get over this feeling. And again, haven't cracked the code yet. So I have had to navigate a lot of insecurity and just a lot of feelings of inferiority when it comes to playing with peers who, again, I've had this notion that my peers have not struggled as much as me, which is very, you can see that as just kind of uninformed perhaps, but that's what I've struggled with. And I'm like, I need to make myself seem as competent as everyone else on stage with me and cover up the idea that, I'm nervous and I don't feel like I'm going to be playing my best today. So.
Yeah, well, I think it's interesting to just hear that perspective. And I appreciate what you said about maybe that's just me not being informed, because I bet if you had this conversation with those people, they'd probably have something similar to say about all of this. And I think it's that kind of segues me into, okay, well, nervousness, anxiety, it's not necessarily something that will ever go away. Mm-hmm. It's helpful to just name it and understand that, some days it's going to show up, some days it's not going to. And you mentioned something like when it happens, I either go down this spiral, no, yes. Or it's like, all right, like get on to the next thing. Yeah. The next thing. How do I move on to the next moment? Like be present. And I think, something that you said when I was reading about you before we had this conversation that I really loved was that you said that the most healing thing you've ever experienced, the most healing thing that you've ever experienced is to learn to not take yourself so seriously. Mm-hmm. What does it look like to not take yourself so seriously?
Yeah. Well, if the picture hasn't been painted yet in what I've shared, I'm a little bit of a perfectionist. I was almost wearing it as a badge of honor, but that badge was actually stabbing me in the chest every time I put it on. It's like a pin. And I realized, what? This is not actually something to tout around and to carry with me and to be proud of. I think it's a part of my personality and just my outlook when it comes to excellence. Like I have a standard of excellence that I hold myself to, but I've had to learn to acknowledge and remember, like, okay, I am human and I'm not perfect. Yes, I can have a high standard for myself, but if I don't meet it, that's not a reflection of who I am and who I'm trying to be. And so I've had to figure out, okay, how do I physically, I have to be able to physically engage with this in a way that feels tangible and feels duplicatable. And for me, it just came with smiling and laughing in the moment, and I'll go to play a note and I'd miss it and I just have to kind of smile at myself. And even just the act of doing that in the moment would allow me to continue with a little bit less weight and less I'm not going to, now I'm almost getting rid of whatever weight that was. I'm not going to take it with me to the next phrase. I just let it go and let's move on. And, I had one of my professors in grad school tell me something that stuck with me to this day. And he said, you need to learn to love everything that comes out of your instrument because you can't take any of it back. Once it's out there, it's there. So you better love it. Otherwise, it's what other option do you have? You might as well stop playing. Just put the instrument down and leave. And if you're not going to do that, then you might as well love everything that comes out, whether you intend it or not. And, the cliche a lot of times with improvisation is there are no mistakes and everything that comes out can be used. And even the mess ups are beautiful. And as cliche as it is, I actually do believe it to be true. And I actually do abide by that in my own navigation of those moments of just I didn't intend for that to happen, but that's cool. How about I play it again and make it intentional, and that's been years of just those moments coming up and making those split decisions. It's okay. Move forward. It's okay. Move forward. It's this self-therapy that comes in small little moments. And we always have the decision in those moments. I'm either going to try to lift myself up or I'm going to cut myself even further down, which why would we want that? But we do it anyway. We tend to just bring ourselves down, knowing it doesn't help us, knowing it's not what we want, but it's almost like we feel like we deserve it because we weren't perfect.
So well put. And Yeah, it's like weird because what you're talking about is kind of like it's hard and it's sad, but it's also so liberating because I'm like, oh, like there are other people that feel this way and they continue to move forward because it's so human to feel these things. It's so normal and so many people walk away from their instrument because they like believe that they believe that perfect is the way. And I think it's especially hard, with all the technology that we have to make us so perfect and, an image as well. Like you literally can make yourself look however you want and sound however you want. And so there is actually this, even though perfect does not exist in the real world, we as humans have created perfect, like as a presentation. What keeps you coming back to music? I think you probably said it just a moment ago, but, through all the challenges and craziness that musicianship can bring. And, we talked about that quite a bit in the beginning of this conversation, just the challenges that can arise as a musician that kind of make a lot of people walk away from their art. Why do you keep coming back to it? What's your why?
Yeah, geez. I think I've never really been a quitter. I wouldn't say that's a purely great thing for me. It's been something I've struggled with throughout time where it's like, I'm not going to give up, but I might not be completely healthy through it. I might spite myself. I might do it. Yeah. You continue to spite yourself sometimes. At least that's what I would do. But nonetheless, when I can see the fruits of it, of still trying to work hard, that's what keeps me going for sure. Ironically enough, the trumpet being one of the most difficult physical and mental endeavors I've ever put myself through in my entire life, more than 3/4 of my life on this earth has been dedicated to kind of this torturous thing. But there's been so much beauty that's come out of it, not only in terms of opportunity, but just what I've learned about myself. And I think I am really attracted to knowledge, especially self-awareness and self-enlightenment. I'm always trying to continue to grow and expand. And that's something that's definitely kept me coming back. The fact that I've learned so much about me through the pursuit. I'm kind of addicted to that. And it's a feeling. The feeling I get when it goes well is an indescribable feeling. You can't really replicate it outside of it just happening again whenever it does happen again. But that feeling of flow, that feeling of playing with an ensemble and everyone is just on one accord and we're actually communicating and creating a moment that cannot be made again or manufactured. And the instrument is not even there. It feels like I'm just singing and air is moving and sound waves and those moments, we chase those moments as artists.
Either it's like this really positive, beautiful musical experience that is transcendent or, some level of that because you feel it went so well, or you have this incredible learning experience.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is just so invaluable.
Yeah, totally. I think, the way I would sum that up, or at least I've heard that summed up, is sometimes you win, sometimes you learn.
Love that. That's so good.
Yeah.
Yes. Since music is the expression of ideas and emotions, this ephemeral art that, creates this space for us to do self-exploration and communication with other people. I'm curious how you actively honor your mind, body, and spirit as a musician, or you could take a different route and simply, how do you honor your authentic musical voice?
I think about the idea of reputation versus character. I think those are two opposite things in some ways. And in today's world, we are expected to build our reputation and present it to the world. That is where emphasis is placed, no matter what it is you're doing. If you're an attorney, if you're an accountant, if you're a teacher, if you're an artist, whatever it is, people are always thinking about my reputation. Oh, my reputation. And how can it be manifested? What is your resume? That's a part of your reputation. How many people know you? That's a part of, so many things. And ultimately, what I believe reputation is who other people think you are, right? Character is who you are and who you choose to be, no matter what arena you're in. And character is not something that you can obviously teach to people. It's something that you can make people aware of, and we hear it all the time. We've heard it since we were kids. Good character, but how often do we sit down and talk about what that really means? It's going to be a little different for everyone, of course, but I guess for me, that's, since kind of understanding that dichotomy, I've decided to take the character route. Like, I have a reputation that has been built just kind of inadvertently, so to speak. Like, the more you achieve and accomplish and put yourself out there, yes, a reputation of you will be built up for others to see and acknowledge, and that's who they see when they look at you. But hopefully behind that reputation is your character. And again, you get to choose what that is. That is integrity. That is, your intentions when how you treat people. And again, being honest with the work you're putting in for yourself, and being honest with yourself when, I guess, whether things are good or bad. And it's not really tied to what other people see. We don't need to show people exactly what we think they need to see or what they tell us they need to see from us. I feel like as long as you're putting the work in, as long as you're keeping yourself teachable and constantly seeking wisdom, is a route to building character. And when you do that, I think that you start to grow yourself internally, which in turn affects your musical voice, your artistic outlook on how you treat your art form and how you, treat other people's and how you view it in the world. And that is a magnetic thing. That is an infectious thing. That is what I think draws people in the most. And for me, that's what it is. I'm trying to grow myself internally. That is work that has to be done. No one can do that work for you. And I think it does affect your art and affect how you interface with everyone you meet and how people might receive your art.
That is super powerful. Yeah, that concept of reputation versus character, that's super, super cool. I never really thought about it like that, but it's so true. And pursuing the character component is what allows your music to speak, and ultimately it gives you that foundation, right? So
yeah,
that's illuminating. Thank you for that. That's super cool. And I kind of want to segue, because you mentioned, this foundation earlier on, your beautiful, original, joyful foundation. I would love to hear about the inspiration behind this piece and kind of how everything you've talked about ties into the meaning of this piece that you wrote, that you chose to share.
Yeah, so Joyful Foundation is a song that I wrote for myself, and that's not something I would typically do in my little composing career. I don't normally write for me. I write for moments. I write maybe for other people. I just ideas, whatever it may be. But I wrote it as a kind of a letter to myself, so to speak. When I say foundation, at least in this case, I'm not thinking about musically, so to speak, in terms of like, oh, look how great I've been up to this point. Just, remember that and go from there kind of thing. But I'm just saying music as a gift and as a blessing in my life. It truly has been. And no matter how good or bad at it I think I am, I cannot deny, the richness that it's given to my life and the vessel it's allowed me to become in moments and different places all over the world. And that is joy for me. So for me, joy it's not happiness. It's not, everything is great. It's actually kind of the opposite. It's being able to persevere and to see what is good in the midst of what might not be good. No matter what's happening, joy can always be there. It's like this, the candlelight in the darkness. So that song is a reminder for me. So it's steady. It's a steady ground. It is, no matter, again, how I feel, what is happening circumstantially, I'm actually fine. And as long as I am moving with sincerity and authenticity, as long as I'm treating people with kindness and respect and, putting forth my best effort to improve and to just constantly grow, then I really don't have anything to complain about. So that's what the song is for me.
I love that. That's really beautiful. We all are amazing in these special ways, these unique ways. But joy is not being amazing in the eyes of other people, right? And it's not, joy is not like, I nailed that gig and now I'm like happy about my life. I love that idea of having a joyful foundation that is not, it's not contingent on the things that happen to us or even the things that we do, right? It's a choice. So looking for the light and building foundations on that light that you choose to see. Thank you so much for having this conversation with me today. There's so much wisdom and truth in this, and I am so excited for everyone to hear it. And I'm also extremely stoked to have people hear your piece as we wrap it up here. So thank you again so much for joining me today on Artistry with Heart and for sharing your wisdom and truth with the world. And I'm curious how people can get in touch with you beyond this. Is it at your YouTube channel, Justin Copeland Music? Is that?
Yeah, that's going to be probably the best outlet right now. I mean, I do have presence on all the music platforms online, especially like Spotify. Still looking to put some more music of my own up there, but I can be found across the platforms on other projects from friends and such over the past few years, and have a lot of stuff I've been working on recently with other people that's being released now or will be released soon.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Well, everyone keep your ears and eyes out for Justin Copeland Music. He can be found at his YouTube channel under Justin Copeland Music, and it can be found on Spotify as well as all the other platforms. So definitely check out his other music. But for now, please stay tuned and enjoy Joyful Foundation. We hope that you'll stay tuned for future episodes like this one. Justin, thank you so much for joining me today. you.